Okay, when digital like TV was coming in, there was DVB-T is from the DVB project, right?
DVB.
Yeah, DVB project.
Digital Video Broadcasting.
How has the DVB project been instrumental in the implementation of like digital TV in Australia at the start when you were doing this 3 years ago?
Well, originally it wasn't just DVB. You know, the American system is called ATSC, ATSC.
ASTC.
Yeah. And so in the beginning, going way back, you know, you're talking mid-90s, that's when they were deciding which system to go for. And the Americans pretty much thought Australia would go with their system. And they put a lot of money and time into that, lobbying the government. And then I knew quite well some of the people at in the Broadcasting Authority, it was called at that stage. And they had a policy and implementation division, which is made up of policy people and engineers. And they put it through rigorous testing and tested both systems and decided that DVB, the European system, would be the best way for Australia to go forward. When that happened, one of the side effects of that was the Americans just dropped Australia when that happened in digital.
As in dropped as in...
Well, see, America was always more like Japan, the United States, in that their digital TV focus was high def. So they wanted digital television so they could do high definition. That was the main point of it. Whereas the Europeans were not interested in high definition. They just wanted to do multi-channel. Yeah. So when Australia went with DVB, and by the way, Australia was the only country that went DVB with high def. We were the only country. It was very odd for Australia to say, we're going to go DVB, European, but no one in Europe was doing high def. It was a completely new thing to do. The Americans just said, well, we put all this effort into you and we want to do HD and now you've gone with DVB. They just sort of dropped it. So then the battle started within the media of all the people lining up to kill off HD. But Australia had that, as I said, that very unique position in the early days of doing DVB HD as well. So it was a special sort of provision in the specifications to do it. And I think people forget that Australia was actually an innovator in digital television because of that. You know, because the government did mandate high definition as part of that digital TV rollout, they had to incorporate that within DVB. And the Europeans, as I said, they were anti-HD, completely anti-HD. No one in Europe was doing HD. Even if you go back 4 years ago, you really only have one broadcaster doing HD, and that was Euro 1080. I don't know if you've heard of Euro 1080. They're a satellite broadcaster, and they were doing HD, started doing HD into, I think it was probably a bit further back, like 2003, 2004, they started broadcasting HD. But they were the only ones. No one was doing HD terrestrial.
Is there a reason why they didn't want to do it?
Absolutely, because you've got so much spectrum. You know, there's only so much bandwidth in the atmosphere, so to speak. So if you've only got 7 megahertz or 8 megahertz per block, so let's say you've got a channel of 7 megahertz, with analog, it meant you got one channel. That was it, and that's the way it's always been. And then when digital came out, you could do one high def channel in ultra high quality with minimal compression, or you could do 5 or 6 channels.
Okay.
And that's what it all hinges on, is what you want to do and what your business, objective is. So in Europe, they went down the multi-channel route. So they saw digital as a way of getting 5 or 6 channels for every old analog channel. So if you're a broadcaster, great, you can do, I don't know, we'll make it up, UK Channel 1, you can, instead of just having one channel, you could do, your main channel, you can have a news channel, You can have a home shopping channel. You can have a rerun channel, a sports channel, and you can cram that all into that spectrum, and off you go. So instead of having 5 channels, all of a sudden you've got 20 channels, and that's what they wanted to do. That was their business model, was to go that way. I think a lot of the reason the Europeans went that way is because homes are generally smaller. They have smaller TVs. They weren't really much into home cinema or big plasmas and all. That's changed now, but back then, so they had a different kind of take on it. Whereas America and Australia as well was more, I think, focused on the home cinema kind of thing, and the bigger the screen, the better. And I think that's what drove a lot of the sensibility for it. So really Europe, and as I said, I haven't really kept up with it in the last couple of years, so I don't know what Europe's doing now. It's kind of old news to me. But I know that they are doing some HD, but they've had to play catch up because they put themselves really behind the 8 ball, and they basically trashed HD and said, "No, this is a total waste of money. Nobody wants it. Nobody wants to watch high definition programming," and that's the line that the press, the media in Australia, who was anti-HD, that's the line they ran for a number of years, trying to get the government to give in and get rid of the HD mandate, and allow them to multi-channel, because the broadcasters in Australia, the commercial broadcasters, they weren't allowed to multi-channel. It was prohibited in the legislation. They've changed that now, of course, but they weren't allowed to. They had to do HD, a normal channel. So that's what they wanted to knock off. But it wasn't all the broadcasters. It wasn't. I'd say, Channel 9 wasn't really that keen on multi-channel, and Channel 10 wasn't either. And they thought that the problem with multi-channel is quality and fragmentation. So like Channel 9 was happy to go with an HD channel because they thought it was better to have one high quality channel with high quality programming and pictures than to have 5 channels of rubbish. And they thought that was a better business model for them, because content costs money. So if you've got to buy programming for 5 channels, that's going to cost a lot of money. You've got to have the advertisers to support it. So they weren't sure that fragmentation would work. Channel 7, on the other hand, they were really aggressive about it. They wanted to multi-channel, because they wanted to do sport. Because Channel 7 had always done a lot of sport. So they wanted to open this up and basically do like pay TV, with lots of channels. And they weren't allowed to do it. So they Channel 7, in conjunction with the press, both the Fairfax press and the other the Murdoch press, they ran a very aggressive campaign together to knock it off. And they ultimately failed. The government didn't give in and they kept HD, although now we do have multi-channelling, so I suppose in some way they got their way in the end.
Are Fairfax and Murdoch still planning to... Are they still lobbying to have like sort of an interactive data TV sort of channels?
I don't know. But see, I looked at, when I did my masters, I looked at interactive. You mean interactive TV?
Yeah.
Yeah. I looked at interactive TV, and there's no, as I understand it, there's no restriction on them doing interactive TV. Okay. The reason they're not doing it, as I suspected originally when I wrote my masters, is that it's too expensive. Interactive TV costs a lot of money to implement. You need programmers and people building all those applications for each program, and you need to have the interactivity out there. So you need to have people with, boxes or connections that can actually interact with, and it just hasn't happened. It's actually, interactive TV in Australia has absolutely bombed. It's terrestrial. It's actually performed more poorly than I thought it was going to. I mean, who's got it? Have you got it? Yeah, I've never seen it.
I didn't know it existed.
It is in Europe. In Europe it's quite big, Or I don't think it's as big now as it was, because there's a lot of hype about it 5 years ago. And in fact, that's really interesting, because a lot of the press, the journalists, and the commentators out there, they were saying, "Oh, don't do HD. No one wants HD. No one can tell the difference between HD and standard def. It doesn't matter. Do interactive TV. That's the future." And they were totally wrong, because people, I believe, most people don't want to interact with their television. You know, when I come home from work, the last thing I want to do is interact with my TV. You know, I've been on a computer all day. I don't want to click buttons. I just want to sit there and be entertained and relax. That's what television is. It's you know, a different medium. You know, but that's what they thought it would be, this fantastic thing that was going to take off. And the other thing in Europe is, because a lot of European television is delivered via cable, you know, pay TV. Of course, you've got the back channel connection. So if you want to buy something or interact with the football scores or something, you can actually, because you've got a cable connection back, you can actually do that. Whereas here, it's a lot more problematic, except if you're on Foxtel or something like that.
Yeah, because I think one of our group mates he looked into this data casting trial that was up in Sydney. I think it was called Digital 44 or something. Yeah.
Why do you? It's like basically a question. It's like, Australia trialled data casting D44 in Sydney for a while. Why do you think it failed? And do you see a possibility of something similar being launched again, or has the internet made this redundant?
Is that probably no.
It's a good question. Data casting. It's not an area, or was an area, that I was particularly interested in. It was on the periphery. But what I do remember about it was the people that ran the trial would probably say it failed because they had too many restrictions on them. You know, I can't remember the exact restrictions, but there were things like they weren't allowed to show more than 10 minutes of a particular segment. Basically, what they broadcast on Datacast could not resemble TV. That was the thing. It had to be something like weather updates or downloading software, or it was an information service basically. It's not it was not a traditional broadcast television service. So those people would say, this failed because you put too many restrictions on us. And I think there's probably a lot of truth in that. The other reason it failed, perhaps, is that people overestimated the value of it, of people wanting to access information off their television. Again, do people really want to do that? And secondly, as you say, if the internet does that, and we have all these mobile devices anyway, what's the point? Whether it's something that would be future application, who knows? Yeah. It just changes so fast that, a couple of years from now it could be a really workable thing. And that's the thing that you have to bear in mind, like, because of technology, everything's moving so fast that what didn't work 5 years ago might work next year as things evolve. And it was like that with high definition. High definition failed in the early 90s. I don't know if you're aware of HDMac in Europe. The Europeans launched high definition in would have been the early 90s, and based on what the Japanese were doing. And the problem with it was analog, not digital, because they didn't have the digital capability then. So it took up huge bandwidth, and it cost a fortune, and didn't work. And that's why the Europeans, part of why they dropped HD. But when we moved to digital, that whole HD thing became doable and affordable. So it's really dangerous to base everything that you think about the future on what happened in the past, because it can change and it might suddenly work really well.
I think we sort of were touching on it a little bit back, but I noticed in your thesis you said something about multi-channeling, its merits being couched in terms of your choice and control. So Do you think those terms, particularly what we've just been